will end the war in Ukraine. I will stop the chaos in the Middle East, and I will prevent World War III from happening. And you have no idea how close we are.
How close we are, Larry.
That was probably, of the three declarative statements he made there, the most accurate, because we are, and the drones that were flown at Zaporizhia, the nuclear power plant there, the largest, I think it's the largest one in Europe. It's in Belarusia, of course, but it's Europe. That's another indicator. And the fact that we're allowing Zelensky to do this sort of thing, NATO is allowing him to do it, whomever, is just reprehensible, because we are, as one of my colleagues said this morning, the hand is moving towards midnight, and it's so close to midnight that you can hardly differentiate whether it is at midnight or not. And this is the most dangerous theater for it. I think we have convinced Vladimir Putin that we are utterly unreliable. We are deceitful. We have drugged the EU and NATO into that deceit and that unreliability. And I think he has made a conscious decision. I'm almost positive he's made one that Russia will have to fight NATO eventually, or some facsimile thereof. I don't think he thought it was imminent. I think now he thinks in his lifetime, in his time as the leader of Russia, he may have to fight NATO.
Larry, do you think that Donald Trump is changing his rhetoric toward Russia and toward the conflict in Ukraine? Because as I played a video, as you watched, he said that he's going to put an end, and he was talking before 2024 presidential election that he wants to put an end to the conflict in Ukraine. But the way he's just playing with the issue in Ukraine and talking about sanctions, talking about exaggerating the casualties on the part of Russians, how is that going to help him?
I think he thinks he's building a negotiating position, but that is, as you just intimated, in total defiance of his original statement, which you played. I expected him fully to do a sort of a Kim Jong-un North Korea deal, and I hoped that it wouldn't wind up like that one, because he just didn't have the follow through there. He didn't stick with it. Had he stuck with it, I'm not so sure he wouldn't have succeeded, but he doesn't have that kind of stick-to-itiveness. He doesn't have that kind of determination and persistence. He's a very flighty character, if you want to really put it bluntly. Very temporal character. He goes from one hour to the next hour, and mercurial is the term I've used. But in this case, had he done even remotely what he said in that clip you played, cut the money off, cut it off, period, no more money, and told everyone else, you send money and I'll be very irritated at you. And that might cause me to get out of NATO even quicker than I thought I would. So don't send any more money, EU, Germany, France, or anybody else. And stop the arms flow. That would have got the oligarchs really concerned, because that money's going into their coffers. That money is funding their lifestyles. And they're the ones who are supporting Zelensky, and they will do that so long as they are able to steal as much as they possibly can carry away. And that's what we got going. You have to cut that off. You have to stop it. He knows that, I think. I don't think he's stupid enough to not know that. And he's got to, conclude, all right, I have a position right now that's good for negotiation. You said it before the election. You were dramatic about the way you said it. Nothing's changed much, except more people have died, particularly Ukrainians. Let's get to it. Let's get to it. Get yourself a new envoy if you don't like the, 80-year-old Keith Kellogg. Get yourself a new envoy. Let's get to it. You be the envoy. Let's get to it. Putin is willing to be his envoy. Drag Zelensky into the deal or get rid of Zelensky. This is not rocket science. This is not difficult. Not really. If you're the kind of person Trump is and you bring that kind of imprimatur to it, it's not complex at all. Donald Trump is not complex. Do it, and quit bragging about it, or quit saying you're going to do it and do it. He sent Witkoff, I think that's his name, to the golf partner to Israel, to kind of say that to Netanyahu, as I see it. Now it's falling apart, of course, because Bibi's not in any way, fashion, or form committed to what he probably told Witkoff he was going to do. And Witkoff was a fool to think that Bibi was going to respond to what he wanted him to do in the long run. They won't even make it to the end of the first 42-day period, I don't think. Israel has not passed a 24-hour period, Nima, without killing in Lebanon and killing in Gaza, and certainly killing on the West Bank. So a ceasefire to Israel is a lull to stop the killing, take it from 100 a day down to 10 a day. None of the things that Trump has said were going to happen have happened yet. Now, I can go into detail on Gaza because I think there is something cooking there. I think it's cooking on at least 3 burners on a 4-burner stove right now.
Larry, the pictures coming out of Gaza, do you think that Israel was successful in its operations against Hamas?
Not in any way, fashion, or form. They killed a lot of people, but most of those people were women and children and innocent civilians. Yeah, from time to time, they might have been at gunpoint or maybe even willingly helping people in tunnels and that sort of thing. But I don't think it was widespread. I think mostly he killed innocent people. And I think Bibi knows that. I think the IDF knows that they're killing innocent people. But they've come to a point where killing for them is an end in itself, just killing. I think I'm really worried they open the Nazarene Quarter and let people start to flow back to the north so they could kill them again. So they'd be concentrated particularly in already bombed out places and very vulnerable so they can kill them again. And we're talking about, I would suspect doubling the casualties that have already occurred on a daily basis very soon, if not today or tomorrow. And that's Netanyahu's plan. He's never deviated from that plan. And he's not deviating now. He's just bowing to some realities that occurred for a few moments. But he's right back on track again. And what he's doing on the West Bank right now is equally egregious to what he was doing in Gaza. So nothing's changed really, except maybe the scene a bit. And he has assuaged to a certain extent some of the ill will against him, which was growing to a crescendo, by getting some of the hostages back. Look at the euphoria that we have made over the hostages and compare that with, for example, mainstream media in America's coverage of the deaths in Gaza, the horrendous deaths in Gaza. The joy over the hostages coming back has gone way past any coverage of the slaughter in Gaza. And that's the nature of this conflict. It's the nature of our relationship with Israel. No one tells the truth about what's happening to the Palestinians, and everyone revels over celebrations of the Holocaust and the hostages coming back. It's reprehensible. It's unconscionable, but that's us. That's the empire in Israel.
Larry, getting back to Putin and the conflict in Ukraine, there is an article in the Time that says that Zelensky or Ukraine is losing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the United States is losing. The United States is winning. Mm-hmm. Do you think the idea on the part of the Biden administration was the same, and maybe they have convinced the Trump administration that we're winning in Ukraine? Doesn't matter what's going on with Ukraine, but the United States is winning over Russia?
Well, Donald Trump would have to be a particularly obtuse individual. And I don't think he's that. In some areas, maybe yes, but I don't think, generally speaking, he's stupid. And he would have to be absolutely willing to reverse everything he'd said before he was elected. That apparently got him elected, especially that which involved Ukraine. I think Americans are sick and tired of this war. I think a good majority of Americans are sick and tired of it. So they want it to stop. And that was That was a mover of some people from either I'm not going to vote at all to, hey, there is a candidate that at least agrees with me on this, and so I'm going to vote for him. There are a lot of things that went into his win, if you will, but that was one of them, I think. So he's got to, I think he's got to, because he said what you showed in that clip, but also because people are waiting for him to do it. And the idea that anyone could convince him now, from what I think he has learned, that we're winning against Russia, whereas Ukraine is losing, is nonsense. First of all, because Ukraine losing after all we put into it is a defeat for us. And overall, Putin's battle-hardened military, revived industrial base, workarounds for our maximum sanctions, booming economy in some respects, certainly in respects to military hardware, is a disadvantage for the empire, not an advantage. And I haven't even mentioned Xi Jinping and Putin and the relationship they have, and the relationship that he has with others, particularly in the BRICS conglomerate, that joins hearts that are sick and tired of the empire. They're sick and tired of the empire, and they are going to make sure that in the next 30 years, the next generation, perhaps earlier, that they do all they can to aid and abet the collapse of the American empire.
As
This
you
is standard history. This is standard history. When empires get out of hand and other people in the world, and now we have probably 6 to 8 billion other people in the world, don't want to take it anymore.
I think it's good to understand what does winning mean in the eyes of these people. Is Russia militarily weaker than it was before the conflict started? As you mentioned, how about their economy? How about the way that they have been improving their relationship or their partnership with other nations within BRICS? And maybe they're thinking that the disconnection between Russia and Germany would be a win for the United States. That I would argue, even in that case, that wasn't a win, because the way that Germany is losing and their economy is getting worse is not in favor of even an alliance like NATO.
And you have people right now. I was on a webinar. Actually, I was on 2 different webinars coming to relatively the same conclusions. You have people right now like the former CEO of BlackRock. Yes, Nima, the former CEO of BlackRock, who is most likely to be the new chancellor of Germany. And his mantra is going to be to create even more billionaires. And his economist, who will probably be his economics minister, thinks that's good. So you have a Germany developing that is completely out of sync with the majority of the German people, whether they be actually identified with AfD or the smaller party or whatever. And it's not going to last. It's not going to last any longer than, say, a year or two if CDU is elected, or if the coalition they build puts Merz in there as the minister. Can you imagine? I know you remember Schroeder. I think Schroeder went off. The guy George Bush said "F you" in the Oval Office about, because Schroeder told him in the Oval Office that he would not oppose the war. He would not participate, and he would not politically be speaking positively about it. But he told him he would not speak negatively about it. He would not criticize the president. He went right back to Germany and criticized the president. And that's when Bush said "F you" to Schroeder. He didn't want anything to do with Schroeder. And Powell had to manage the U.S.-German account for the entire 4 years of Bush's first term because Bush hated Schroeder. Well, Schroeder went off to Gazprom. Now we got the CEO of BlackRock, a former CEO of BlackRock, who's apt to be the new chancellor of Germany. This just doesn't compute, not with what's happening in Europe in particular and what's happening to Germany. And I listened to this economist who's maybe going to be his economics minister, and I just said, the guy's totally out of touch with the German people. It's just that the German parties have not got their act together to act in concert with regard to these particular issues. But to think that they won't, with these people come in and rapaciously creating more billionaires and making the wealth disparity even greater, maybe even equaling our own in the empire, which is disastrous right now, and expecting to run Germany in a way that the rest of the German people, and indeed all of Europe, won't eventually object to in a very strenuous way is nonsense. And yet that's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing from otherwise supposedly intelligent people.
Larry,
Look at France. I'm France is, France, and who was it? The French foreign minister, maybe, and Macron. They got together and said and agreed to tell the Greenland prime minister or whatever that they would defend him if Trump attacked. Hey, come on, man! What are you talking about? On the one hand, you're supporting him in Ukraine, and on the other hand, you're going to defend Greenland against him, or Denmark against him, I guess is the way they were talking. This is crazy. It is crazy. And it's, someone said to me the other day, are we going back to the typical Europe? And I said, it looks a lot like it. The Europe that's squabbling all the time, arguing with itself, little petty wars, all kinds of disagreements, no unity whatsoever, the EU collapsing, Brussels looking like it's lost. Could be.
but many people are so confused with the way that Donald Trump is handling the case of Ukraine. Before 2024 presidential election, the way he was talking about Ukraine was totally different from what we've seen so far in the aftermath of the election. Do you think it's it's a strategic manner on his part? Because not only about exaggerating the casualties on the part of Russians, hugely, 1 million, which doesn't make sense to anybody, even not in the mainstream media, they're not talking that way. And underestimating the casualties on the part of Ukrainians. And then it seems to me that he's trying to put some sort of pressure on the way he's trying to communicate with Russian people. He's trying to say that the situation is not that good as you think it is. Is that the case? Is that part of the sort of manner on the part of Donald Trump to put pressure on Putin?
I don't know. Again, this is something that only Donald Trump can answer. What we do know is that Donald Trump knows nothing about Russia. He knows nothing about Vladimir Putin. He had, a meeting. I think there were actually a couple meetings, but they're superficial. Donald Trump was ill prepared for both meetings. Donald Trump isn't the kind of man who does his homework. He comes in with preconceived notions of what he wants to achieve. And he's susceptible to being abused by the people closest to him. We do know that he has been heavily influenced by Keith Kellogg. Keith Kellogg wrote a paper back in, I think, April or May of last year, which serves as the foundation of the policy options that are being briefed to Donald Trump. This paper is superficial, nonsensical, factually inaccurate, erroneous in analysis. It's a horrible paper, but from this paper comes the advice given to Donald Trump. He's following bad advice, horrible advice, and it's not having the impact. Donald Trump speaking directly to the Russian people. I don't think the Russian people are this superficial, this shallow. They know who Donald Trump is. They're aware of the totality of his, posturing when it comes to Russia. They also know that Donald Trump can't be trusted at all. I mean, this is, I don't know who Donald Trump thinks he's fooling, but the Russians don't have short memories. The Russians are fully cognizant of the fact that Donald Trump, when he was president last time, promised that he was pursuing friendship and ended up being a president that was horrible for Russia, imposing sanctions. But not just that. I mean, Donald Trump, this notion that Donald Trump wouldn't have allowed this war to take place is a lie. This war is Donald Trump's war. He created the conditions. Never forget that the Russian maneuvering that took place in 2021 is, the maneuvering of troops is because of policies put in place by Donald Trump to rebuild the Ukrainian army, to position the Ukrainian army so that it can pose an offensive military threat to the Russians of the Donbass. Straight up. Donald Trump did that. Donald Trump armed them. Donald Trump's the one that went along with the facade of Minsk, leading the Russians down a path, believing that there was going to be, peace all along, knowing that it wasn't. It was just to buy time to build up the army that Donald Trump built up. Donald Trump put the NATO training facility in the Western Ukraine in 2017. Donald Trump built a battalion of Ukrainian forces every 55 days designed to fight to NATO standards to recapture the Donbass. Donald Trump did that. And he wants, maybe in the West we'll forget it. The Russians aren't going to forget that. They know damn well who he is and what he has done. This is Donald Trump's war. And now he's trying to pretend that it isn't. It isn't going to work. It isn't going to fly. So who knows what the hell's going on in Donald Trump's brain? I don't even think Donald Trump knows what the hell's going on in Donald Trump's brain. The problem is he's so deceptive that he deceives himself.
Who's the most influential character in his administration, in your opinion, if he himself is not?
Regarding Russia?
Regarding Russia.
For the moment, Keith Kellogg, but the one thing that Donald Trump won't tolerate is losing. And Keith Kellogg's setting Donald Trump up to be a failure, to lose. And I think at some point in time, Keith Kellogg will be jettisoned because he's nothing more than an anchor around Donald Trump's neck. Donald Trump needs better advisors. And right now, he's being poorly advised.
Because as we talked before, Scott, you said that Donald Trump is going to be in charge of the main policies of his administration. And we know, at least from what we've seen so far with the new people coming to the administration, Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio and even Mike Waltz, these people are not that much influential before, because we had Rex Tillerson, John Bolton. These people were so much powerful when they came to the first administration of Donald Trump. But the new people are not that much powerful, are not that much ideological, and they can be reshaped by Donald Trump. Do you think that's still the case in the new administration, in this administration?
I think Donald Trump learned his lesson from the first 4 years that he was president, not to surround himself with people who thought that they could do a better job than the president could do. Donald Trump has made it clear that he is the president. He alone makes policy, and that if you're going to serve in his administration, you will be subordinated to his will, to his policy designs. And we even saw this with Marco Rubio, who was a one-time political, opponent of Donald Trump, has totally just caved. Marco Rubio is a man who makes it clear that he works for President Trump. He's also acknowledged that there will be places where he will not, tread because it's Trump land, and Russian policy is one of those places. So that, that's where we're at. But the problem is you end up creating a bunch of yes men. Again, I just keep telling Donald Trump, hey, boss, give me an afternoon. Bring all your Russian people in, bring me in. And by the time we're finished, you'll fire all of them and you'll invite me back because they're misleading you about Russia. And it's too bad. It's, there is an opportunity here to solve not just the problem of Ukraine, but the problem of European security. And if Donald Trump was smart and properly advised, he would, and if this is done in terms of a business deal, we're talking about leveraging one property into a bigger property. That is letting the Russians get what they want in Ukraine, but making sure that what a post-conflict European security framework looks like is something the United States can live with, as opposed to being dictated to by a victorious Russia, because we don't have a plan, because we thought that the issue was Ukraine when it's not Ukraine. Russia has said it's not Ukraine. Why do you think Russia put forward the draft treaties they did on December 17th, 2021? Those treaties were designed to avoid a Ukrainian conflict, to focus on the major issue, which was European security framework. That's where Donald Trump needs to be focused on. Ukraine's a lost cause. We're not going to solve it. He needs to stop pretending that he can somehow fix it. He knows what he was trying to accomplish in Ukraine. Remember those 20 bases, the CIA bases that went in there? Who was the president when they went in? Donald Trump. What was the policy of the United States when Donald Trump was president? The strategic defeat of Russia. So, Donald Trump's not fooling anybody. He needs to acknowledge that the policies are failed and come up with something that protects America's national security interests. We're not protected when we continue to pursue bad policy in Ukraine.
It seems that the main objective, as you mentioned, is the same as we've seen in the Biden administration. But Donald Trump, he's trying. Did you see his video to Davos in which he was saying that he would put pressure on Saudi Arabia and BS to reduce the price of oil? And that would consequently influence the Russian economy. The Russian economy would influence the decision of Vladimir Putin, and goes on and on in his calculation. Do you find that a simplistic way of thinking about the conflict in Ukraine?
Yeah, anybody would with a brain. Look, Donald Trump's a transactional person. He thinks everything comes down to transaction and greed. Because he's a man who has no principle, no moral foundation, no ideology other than money, he can't understand a nation that was willing to sacrifice so much to achieve a result that truly impacts. The Russians didn't go to war in Ukraine lightly. This is a big deal for them. This is about NATO expansion. This is about the future of Russia. This is about preserving Russian cultural heritage. Everything. And so, Russia's not going to give up all of that because Donald Trump got the price of oil to go to $45 a barrel. And again, it just shows how stupid Donald Trump is and how stupid his advisors are. Right now, I think the price of oil is about $78 a barrel. That's low. The break-even point for Saudi Arabia is in about $85. That's what they need to balance their budget. So Saudi Arabia right now is basically living off of their savings in order to do United States and the world a favor during a political season where we didn't want gas prices to go up too much. But and the other thing is the break-even point for Russian oil is about $41 a barrel. That's what it costs to produce. Russia needs oil up around $70 to balance their budget, maybe $75 to balance their budget. But to continue to produce oil, Russia needs it around above $41. That's about the average cost of a barrel out of the ground. So as long as it's above $41, Russia can continue to produce oil economically. They aren't going to sell enough or make enough to balance their budget, but they can continue to produce oil. Saudi Arabia, the cost for a barrel is around $10. So that you can bring that price down as much as you want. Saudi Arabia is still going to be able to produce oil. But here's the problem. The United States. Since 2020, all of America's oil growth comes from the Permian Basin of West Texas. All of our new wells are there. The break-even point for an existing Permian Basin well is around $33. So if oil's at 45, they can still make some money. But for new wells, all of our new production, new wells, the average break-even point is $66. You drop the price of oil below $50. I'm a Marine and math isn't my thing, but 45 is lower than 50. And you collapse the new oil production market in the United States. And within 2 years, we'll lose 30% of our oil production. Donald Trump is just stupid. Does he really think that West Texas oilmen, especially the wildcatters who've poured in their entire future, they've gambled everything on the promise of market stability made by the U.S. government, that oil will be kept between $76 and $80 a barrel. So now they can say, okay, we can go ahead and put in these wells and start production, to get our money recouped. He thinks What, you're going to go in and drop oil? Russia can produce oil forever. Saudi Arabia can produce oil forever. The United States can't produce oil forever. We keep oil at $45 a barrel for 2 years. Our oil economy collapses. And we have people who will lose everything. And when the West Texas economy collapses, the American economy collapses. Donald Trump is dumber than a box of bricks if he thinks this is a strategy that works. The other thing is, didn't he know what happened the last time he play stupid games? This is what could happen. As the price lowers, the Saudis and the Russians just keep pumping oil out. And so now you have low oil, you have a glut, and the price shrinks even lower. And now it can drop down to $21 per barrel. The Saudis keep going to 10. There's certain oil fields in Russia that can produce oil at 12. And they'll just keep pushing. They'll keep pushing oil on the market. And you know what happens to all the American money? It loses all value. In fact, to own a barrel of oil costs you money, because now you're going to have to pay the oil you have. There's no storage. And so having oil doesn't make you money. It costs you money. That's what happened back in, I think in 2020. The price of oil went from being, $30 a barrel to negative $18 a barrel. Is that really the game that Donald Trump's ready to play? Let me just say something to Donald Trump and his advisors right now. Saudi Arabia and Russia knows the oil production business better than you do. Donald Trump is a New York State real estate guy. He ain't Rex Tillerson. He's not, any of these other oil men. Bring an oil man into your business before you start talking stupidity. Fire Keith Kellogg now. The man doesn't know anything about anything. Okay? He looked good on Fox TV, and I guess he whispered sweet nothings in your ear, but he knows nothing about nothing. Get rid of him, because he's going to destroy the credibility of your administration. You got one shot at Vladimir Putin. One shot. Make it a good shot. Make peace happen. If not, Russia will just ride this thing out, and Russia will outlast Donald Trump. There's the other guarantee. I can guarantee one thing. Vladimir Putin will be the president of Russia when Donald Trump's term ends. And if Donald Trump screws this up, Vladimir Putin will be the president of Russia when J.D. Vance's one-term presidency ends and the Democrats come back in after 8 years. So, it's up to Trump. He's just poorly advised right now. Poorly advised.
Do we know who's behind choosing these people like Kellogg? Because as we've been watching his videos on Fox News, and the way that he was talking about the conflict, it wasn't that much different from the Biden administration. And here comes the question: who? So for what reason Donald Trump has decided to choose him? It's
loyalty. That's it. That's the only litmus test. Loyalty.
But he's going to be in charge of Ukraine. How is that loyalty going to work with him and his administration if he's not going to improve the situation in Ukraine in favor of the United States?
Well, Donald Trump isn't looking for another Mike Pompeo or John Bolton or H.R. McMaster or anybody like that. Donald Trump's looking for people who will just say yes, sir, and tell Donald Trump what he wants to hear. But Donald Trump isn't loyal to any man. And so Keith Kellogg will fail and he'll be fired. That's the kind of person Donald Trump's looking for.
And Vladimir Putin, we know that before 2024 presidential election, many people in Russia, they had some sort of hope with the new administration, with the Trump administration. Do you think that sort of hope is fading away, or we have to wait and see the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin? And I personally don't believe that would be a huge deal on the part of considering what's going on in Ukraine, because Donald Trump at the end of the day would decide based on what's he getting from the intelligence from these people in who are in contact with Keith Kellogg.
I'm not quite sure what the question is.
The question is, how is the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin is a great deal in terms
could
of
be,
solving
but
the situation in Ukraine?
I don't think the Russians have any false expectations. They know who Donald Trump is. They also understand the vagaries of American politics. They don't trust the United States as far as you can throw the United States. So I think the Russians are playing a game right now, giving Donald Trump a chance. Why not? What does it hurt? Let him come in. If he's willing to do things, do it. But the Russians aren't going to change anything about what they're doing. They're winning. So they're not going to yield. They're not going to give anything up. They're going to give Donald Trump a chance. And when he fails, and I believe he will fail, Russia will say, well, I'm sorry, you go back to the United States and do whatever it is the hell you're doing over there, but we're going to just continue winning this war. And we're prepared to do it the easy way or the hard way. I mean, Donald Trump threatening the Russians, we're going to do it the hard way. What a stupid threat. I mean, it's just nonsensical. But, Russia's doing it the hard way right now on the ground in Ukraine, slaughtering the Ukrainians, pushing forward relentlessly. And the Ukrainians have no chance to stop them. NATO has nothing to stop them with. This is what Donald Trump inherited. And the U.S. doesn't have the military power to intervene meaningfully. And it would be in total opposition to the policy direction that Donald Trump claims he wants to go, to get out of entangling wars that they can't win. So he needs better advisors. He really does need better advisors. I mean, just again, to show you how stupid Keith Kellogg is, how superficially stupid Keith Kellogg is. He's actually put forward a 100-day plan that has the Russians signing an agreement on May 9th. May 9th is the day Russia says we buy into this agreement. But what is the agreement? Russians surrender. So he expects the Russians to surrender on May 9th, Victory Day, not just any Victory Day, the 80th anniversary of the Soviet and Allied victory over Nazi Germany. Keith Kellogg truly is the stupidest man to ever populate the planet if he thinks that ever has a snowball chance in hell of happening. I'm sorry. That just shows anybody even put that into the plan. They're ignorant about the realities of Russia. Even if everything you said about Russian casualties figures were true, Russia would never surrender on May 9th. And the deal that Keith Kellogg is asking Russia to buy into is a surrender. And Russia's not defeated. The smartest thing Donald Trump could do, call me president, is tell Putin, hey, on May 9th, I'd like to send a delegation of American service members to march in the parade with you in commemoration of this grand event. And I'd like to send an American delegation. I won't be able to go because I shouldn't go until we actually have, something solid there. But I would like to send a delegation from the United States to include troops to march in a parade in recognition of, what Russia. That would go very far. That would probably be a stroke of genius because the Russians, now you're playing to their soul. And the Russians would have deep appreciation for that and read into that you actually respect them and understand them. And that's the foundation you want when it comes to making difficult choices down the road. The Russians would be more likely to listen to anything you might put on the table after that gesture, as opposed to trying to get them to surrender on May 9th. It just isn't going to happen.
What was happening before Donald Trump takes office in Washington? I was thinking that he's gonna put an end to the conflict in Ukraine. He's trying to get maybe negotiations with Iran and Russia and just making some sort of rapprochement between the two countries and then dealing with China. But so far, it seems that it's the opposite way. He's trying to play with China. He's trying to get closer to China, talk with Xi against to convince them to help Donald Trump against Russia. How is he going to do that? Do you think that with what we've seen so far between Xi and Putin, is that a viable choice?
Again, Donald Trump needs better Chinese advisors too. Trump is an egotist, and he keeps saying that, you know, I know Xi better than anybody else. I have deep insight to this. I mean, he doesn't know anything about Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have a deep friendship, not just, you know, not just a friendly relationship as president, but friendship themselves. They truly like each other. They get along with each other. And the idea that Trump is going to come in and break this friendship apart, what does Trump have to offer? Nothing. I mean, it's interesting you know, what he's doing with Taiwan right now. You know, sanctioning the Taiwanese chip makers and all this stuff. You know, if I were the Taiwanese, I go ahead and accept the fact that America is not a friend. I've been telling them so all along, and that their best course of action is to turn to the Xi Jinping right now and say, how do we do this? What do we need to do? We can't deal with this person anymore. We don't know what the hell this is. We need to have that, you know, one nation, two systems approach. Let's do that now and just leave the United States in the lurch. Because that's the direction it's heading. We'll abandon Taiwan because we don't stand for anything. Now, again, if Trump was smart, he would go to China and say, I want to work with you on bringing it into the Taiwan crisis, and, you know, to in a way that satisfies you and satisfies us. You get political capital out of that. And now you've shown yourself to be a friend of China, and now they might listen to you when you talk about Russia and things of that nature. But China owes Trump nothing, and Trump has nothing on China. There's nothing he can bring to the table. So this is ridiculous that he's somehow going to play the two sides off against each other.
The head of Ukrainian intelligence, Budanov, said that there was a leak that it seems to me that he said that they need to negotiate as soon as possible before summer because everything is just collapsing in Ukraine. Do you think that has anything to do with the reality of what's going on in Ukraine?
Well, he's the head of intelligence, and he says everything's collapsing. That sounds like it's realistically based. There won't be negotiations. I mean, if Donald Trump wants to take one thing away, Zelensky will not be at the table. Zelensky won't be recognized as the leader. Russia just isn't going to recognize Zelensky. Zelensky needs to be removed and replaced with somebody who will then understand what's at stake here, which is the surrender of Ukraine, not a negotiation. And that's the reality. The Ukrainians keep acting as if they have a vote in how this ends. They don't. They lost. And that's the reality. Russia will continue to put pressure. This front is collapsing quicker than most people recognize. There's nothing left to back it up. NATO is bankrupt. NATO troops will never be permitted on the soil of Ukraine. The United States isn't willing to go to war over Ukraine. Russia has military reserves and military production capacity and, you know, the operational momentum. This is a conflict that Russia is going to win handily in the very short, you know, in the next couple months. So, yeah, Budanov's right. The situation is deteriorating, but the idea that this is going to end in a negotiation between Ukraine and Russia is absurd. Ukraine won't be invited to the table, not as long as Zelensky's in power.
But as you mentioned, there has to be negotiations between Russia and the United States.
No, there doesn't. No, there doesn't. There doesn't have to be. Why does there have to be?
So
Who is
how
the United States? Who is the United States in this conflict? I'm Russia. You're
the main
America.
party is the United States, Scott. The
No,
main
it's not.
party that is
How many American
supporting
troops are on the ground in Ukraine today fighting? None. How many American divisions are committed to the defense of Ukraine? None. The United States isn't the main party of anything. That's the Russia's the main party. Russia's the only party. It's the only one that has a vote because it's the only nation besides Ukraine where there are existential consequences to losing. Ukraine lost. They're finished. Russia is winning. That's how it's going to end. Unless America is willing to say, all in, I'm putting all my chips on the table. This is between you and me, Russia. Only one person walks away. Then America has something to say. But America's not a main player when you're just sitting there writing checks. That's all we've done, write checks, empty, throw some weaponry in there and all that. We're not a main player. We're a non-player, a non-actor. This war doesn't end because America wants it to end. This war ends when Russia is ready to say, we've won what we're willing to win. America's not a main player and main actor. That's what Donald Trump needs to understand. He's a supporting actor in all this, but he's now waltzing in as if this is his war to end. It's not. It's not. Russia has adjusted politically, economically, militarily to the reality that the United States and Europe can continue providing equipment and resources to Ukraine. This is a war of attrition that has that already factored in. Russia has built a military machine that will grind up everything that the United States and NATO gives Ukraine and all the Ukrainian troops there, no matter what happens. That's the reality. So what does Donald Trump get to do? He can say, we're going to shut it off. He can tell the Ukrainians, we're not helping you anymore. But there's no leverage he can put on the Russians. There's nothing he can do to pressure the Russians. The Russians are strategically committed on a course of action that will be sustained no matter what. Donald Trump can help shorten the war by making the Ukrainians understand the reality of what's happening, but the 100-day peace plan that Keith Kellogg's talked to him doesn't do that. It continues to infuse false hope into the Ukrainians, that they're going to be a unified state, that they're going to have this large army, that they're going to have European peacekeepers on their soil, that they're going to join the European Union. I love it when an American president tells Europe that you have to bring in Ukraine by 2030. Ukraine would never qualify for European Union membership, let alone by 2030. This is stupidity of the Donald Trump approach. He should understand that Russia has won this conflict. And the easiest way to bring it into this conflict is to tell Ukrainians, you lost. Zelensky, you're gone. I don't care who you get. Go there and surrender. Surrender on the terms that Russia's willing to give to you. That's the best deal you're going to get. The sooner you do that, the sooner this suffering comes to an end. And then work with the Russians on what a post-conflict European security framework looks like. Donald Trump then can play a role on, does he want NATO to survive? Does he want NATO to, how does he want NATO to be? But NATO can't afford to be anything. Donald Trump has set a minimum standard of 5%. NATO can't afford that. If the United States withdraws, it goes up to 10 to 15%. NATO can't afford that. So, yeah, but the idea that the United States has a say in what's going on in Ukraine is a joke. We can convince ourselves that we're all powerful. The Russians don't care. They've made a decision. They're fully committed to achieving all of their stated objectives on terms that they will accept, as Putin says, based upon the present reality.